I hereby call to order the September 2023 special meeting of the Hamilton East Public Library Board of Trustees. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
I have some additions to the agenda. A couple of things that I feel are important. After approval of agenda, allowing for public comments, and then a discussion of the new board resolution. And then after board retreat discussion is a brief discussion of the CDP.
Can you go through those one more time, please?
After approval of agenda, allow for public comments. After public comments, allow for the new board resolution to be discussed. And after board retreat discussion, brief discussion of CDP.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor of the changes to the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of the changes to the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Right. Let's see, we'll start with our legal counsel.
Are we going to start with public comments?
Here we go.
I don't know if there are any, but I thought it was important that we allowed time for it.
We didn't collect any names of those interested in public comment. But to just ask and recognize we've done that before too. But we just add the sign-in sheets, just have name and address.
Fantastic. Is there anybody here who'd like to do public comments? Seeing none. Okay, fantastic.
And it's not really prepared, but I'm Lori Zenfried, I'm from Fisher. And I emailed the board last night, and I appreciated Tiffany's response where she talked about how that it doesn't have to be civil. I agree on all sides, but and that it and she talked a lot about how we need to have patience as we figure this out, which unfortunately I do agree with that. I think that there's been a proposal, or from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, but to potentially hire a PR board, which I think is completely unnecessary, as much of the bad PR is due to, in my opinion, due to the collection, as well as some of the things that board members have done and having the taxpayers pay for that. I believe it's not there. I think that actually there can be a lot of good PR without hiring someone. I also think we should not hire facilitators. I actually just went to the 5-year strategy meeting. The facilitator was awesome, but I'm wondering, you know, shouldn't this have been done a year ago when we were thinking of implementing the policy? Why now, once we have made it publicly, oh, okay, let's listen to the public. But in the past, this board had meetings at 3 o'clock, and it's made it difficult for people to attend. So I don't think that I totally agree with having communication. I think this is a great chance to have communication during the meetings. I don't think that we should spend tax dollars to have facilitators, because I think that people are perfectly capable of speaking and have spoken during the meeting.
Sure, thank you. I will just let you know, the idea around facilitators was so that information could be collected in a very effective way. That was actually something Edra and I had talked about. She thought that with a facilitator, it would be a much better way of collecting information instead of just something unorganized. So that was just something that came up just to make the best use of people's time. Would you like to speak to?
My name is Crystal Taylor. I'm from Noblesville. I just want to say, if we're moving forward with the collections policy, I had actually signed up for the collaboration meeting that got canceled today. So we are moving forward with that. I would love to see those meetings reinstated, and both during the day and at night, so the community can join those who work or those who have time during the day.
Thank you. What was your first name again?
Crystal?
Crystal, that was the hope with the listening sessions, was that we could have the opportunity to talk to people and get ideas and solutions. The reason why it was canceled for today was because I did not have a facilitator on board, and it did not, and Edra just suggested that it would be the best way to do that. I've reached out to a lady that I worked with from my church, and I think Edra also reached out to some people too. So we want it to be as professional and civil as possible. Definitely do those here at the library if we can, and then also reach out to our township offices. So thank you so much for that.
I'm Alyssa Roberts.
Hi, Alyssa.
Fisher's resident. If the conversation is around the policy and going forward with it, One of the big things that I think needs to be discussed and often is not, and as the parent of a preteen is incredibly frustrating, is the difference between children and preteens and teenagers. So I have a preteen, she's pretty convinced she's an adult. That's a different story in terms of running the house, but her brain is capable of consuming and making sense of a whole lot of things. And honestly, when she hears what's happening in the city and in the library, she's insulted. She's insulted as a 12-year-old, and that is pretty unfair when we're trying to raise a community and a nation of critical thinkers. She is capable of her own thought, and we are capable together of determining what's okay for her and what's not. So when I hear the policy over and over again, I hear children. I hear children over and over again. My 12-year-old is not a child. She's a preteen. She deserves to be treated as such. So do all the teenagers who are looking for young adult literature that has been vetted and read and given the approach of this is okay for a teenager, the same way a PG-13 movie is. Although I wouldn't let my child go to all PG-13 movies, that's my decision to make. But again, it comes back to every single time that conversation is around protecting children. And I don't think it's fair, and she doesn't think it's fair, that she gets lumped into a category of even her younger brother, who's 9, who's not capable of the same thought that she is. And I just really need that to be heard and valued, because she's my future. And she's already so much more than just like most teenagers. They can think to a degree that is beyond what we can even think about. And it's not fair. And I think that voice is often ignored. And I also want to point out, in the interest of protecting children, I went to a Noblesville school board meeting, and said 9-year-old heard a whole lot more about inappropriate things from the supporters of this policy in said meeting than he's ever seen in a book before. And I
Thank
think
you.
if we're really protecting children, we should think about that.
Thank you. Quick question, does your daughter
Wait,
read?
I'm
the teen
sorry, I
section?
have to interrupt. We don't typically respond to the commenters, so is this something
Just a
new we're
question.
doing?
Yeah.
So everybody can respond to every commenter? Is
Just a
that,
question.
we typically listen to them?
Yeah, I'm listening, and it,
And
It
it
runs
seems
the
like you're
question.
going to respond to every comment.
is that a problem?
We don't typically do that. It's not typical behavior during public comments. Maybe we want to ask some of the others. I don't know. I don't think it's appropriate.
Well, we're down at the State House testifying. I mean, the state legislators they always ask, and it's a legislative body, so, I mean, so we can, I think it's appropriate to ask.
So everybody's gonna, go ahead,
Yeah,
Greg.
Just make sure we're all on the same page. If
Yeah.
we want
Yeah.
to, just choose as the board, maybe if we want to have comments afterwards, individual board members can choose to respond as long as that's open to everybody, or if we don't.
Sure, it's open to everybody.
Okay, I think that's appropriate because sometimes your responses don't represent the full board, so I guess.
So that people asked about the listening sessions, and then there was another thing, and it just needed some clarification. So
Right,
I think that in the best use of people's time, if they have questions that need clarifying, I don't think that this is the opportunity to just leave things hanging out
Yeah,
there.
I agree
So
with that.
thank you.
well, okay,
Thank you. Oh, but moving forward, we are going to limit these to 3 minutes, but that's fine. Are you timing, Edra? Okay, fantastic. And we will cap this at 30 minutes if we get there.
Katie Rogers, I live in Noblesville. And I got to go this summer to the American Library Association conference, which was a really incredible experience. And since you guys are talking about board retreats, I highly recommend that next year. It's really enlightening participation from all kinds of groups that have wonderful information that may be helpful to you. I was struck by how utterly devoid of ego the entire thing was. My own careers have taken me to gatherings full of just egomaniacs and insufferable blowhards. And as you can imagine, that's the norm in politics and in my industry. But experiencing the ALA conference, it really highlighted the nature of the kind of intelligent people that are drawn to library life. I also signed the Freedom to Read statement, which you can find on the ALA website. I recommend that the board signs that and endorses it publicly. It was originally written and adopted in 1953, but it's been amended over the years, and that statement is too long to read during the freedom of comment. But I would encourage you guys to all go to the American Library Association website and take a read, sign it, and if you guys would report back to us when we can expect support for the community with that statement.
Thank you.
So my name is Marianne Crescent. I'm from Fishers and I'm not an old face, I'm new face, I mean. So what I want to make some comments on is, I saw through the grapevine, the response, about spending lots of more money, facilitate PR. There's really no reason for a public library to have PR communication pieces spent out and cost done, unless you're trying to insert politics into it. The public library is not a place for politics. It is supposed to be a place where books, literature, all kinds of other things for people to learn are there for whatever interests somebody, whether it's LGBTQ books, maybe it's a book on history, maybe it's a TACUS book for the high school for down in Indy. There's so many things that are there. And the fact that the censorship that has been done by moving beyond adult books is just, it's appalling that we've had people say that they're proud that they're the first group that's doing this, when in fact, we shouldn't be doing it at all. There are standards set out by the American Library Association, and the public library needs to be following them. We don't need to be reinventing the wheel in order to play politics or make ourselves look powerful. And as far as leadership from the board, what I expect is cohesive leadership with everybody. And that means that I would not see a letter being copied somewhere that says, I did. This is a board, this is 7 people, and I expect it to work like that. And I would like to see all of the young adult books go back where they belong. They are meant for teenagers, age 14 and above, 12 for some of them, and that's where they belong. We don't belong sending teenagers out into the adult area to find books like romance novels by Jane Green when they're looking for John Green. These are things that have not been looked at. And the community has given lots and lots and lots of feedback of suggestions, to include ones that the board turned down last year in January and February. So the fact that you want to bring a facilitator in to listen to what the community has been saying, you don't want to go back to your old tapes, your old notes to see what was suggested, that's kind of a little bit pathetic. Because it's already been suggested, there's already information out there. And between the 7 of you, you do not need a facilitator to listen to the public, and you do not need a facilitator to speak between the 7 of you. There needs to be leadership and there needs to be cohesiveness, no matter what side of the political divide you sit on, Republican or Democrat, and you can decide what you think I am, and you're going to be wrong. Have a good day.
Welcome back.
Hi, I'm Lori Hand, I'm from Noblesville. I want to state unequivocally that I don't think that this is the right time for listening sessions, because as Mary Ann just said, we've said a lot and hasn't been listened to. But if you do think that you need to do this, then I would say we need to limit the participants to people who live in Noblesville and Fishers, and even better, make it people that have library cards, because we don't need outside agitators coming in here from Napanee and Carmel and Indianapolis. We need to hear from the community. Let's see, and also I don't agree with the way the board vetoed the decision about why. I think that it's a sweet book, and it ends with saying, let's pray for peace. And I don't think that it incites violence, and I don't think that the board should have been able to overturn that decision. And I think if the board did overturn that, maybe it should have been an unanimous vote rather than just a majority vote. I also would call for some accurate descriptions of the word pornography. Be honest about it. There's no pornography in this library. There never has been, there never will be. Get your definition straight. and, debunk the fallacious rumor narrative, because it's just not what's happening. And I'd also like to know why books about people of color and LGBTQ people are being disproportionately targeted. And I would also say, when you finally get new counsel, that, I would advise you to listen to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with what Lori was saying, everything wholeheartedly. I want to say that I have a lot of concern about Mary Jensen from Fishers. I agree, if there are listening sessions, I think they need to include the board. I am uncomfortable with just the board president being in attendance and Edgar Waterman. I think that's a lot of pressure on both of them. I believe it could be biased. And I just think that's inappropriate. The board president, and I'm reading from Indiana, library board documents, any power exercised by the board president must first be granted by the full board in policy or in commonly accepted and understood practice by the board. In other words, the board president does not speak for the board unless the full board has formally or informally delegated that privilege to the president. And there's more, but I have seen that I would call an overstep already. I don't believe every board member, unless there is an open door policy violation. I don't think every board member participated in the recent communications, and I have a problem with that. So I'd like to see the board stick to open door policies, please. And
May I ask what communications you're speaking of?
a letter discussing potential solutions in hiring.
That was the update from me directly. My name is back at the bottom, correct.
Outside firms.
Correct, that was just from me, that was not from the entire board.
Right, correct. Okay, then that was the board president
Correct.
acting.
No, that was the board president giving an update, being transparent.
Okay, okay, and I also think that I understood that when the speaker was speaking that there was no TV interaction. That was a policy that I read, so I think that should be reviewed. And also the sessions the input sessions being scheduled without other board member knowledge. I have a problem with that. And also there are services provided by the State of Indiana Library Association that are free. Team building, working with boards, strengthening. If you go and search that website and the many documents available, those are available for free. And before hiring anybody and spending any more of our taxpayer money, I would encourage you to see what is available to the community before paying. And it was like a clarification and full. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Fawn from Fishers, and I wasn't planning on speaking, so I'm gonna try that. I would like a lot, I guess I would like to know how much has already been spent on this project.
On the collection development policy?
Yes.
Would you like an answer right now?
Sure.
Edra?
I don't have that number.
It's $21,000 for the temporary, correct?
So the hourly rates for the number of hours, yeah, that would be what that is. But the total cost involves opportunity cost, et cetera. But yeah, dollars that would not have been spent otherwise, there's that plus the staff required. But yeah, we haven't calculated it, so I'm not comfortable
Sure.
saying that, but that is accurate for
For the
the hourly
temporary.
rate of the temporary.
And those are the
hours,
ones that
yes.
are doing the reading, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Plus, the $20,000 for the second opinion attorney. We had a very experienced attorney already who specializes, I think, in libraries. So that's on top of that. And then everything's halted. It sounds like they might want some books moved back. That's gonna cost money. I think that needs to be know before you start spending other money. Additionally, the librarians in January, I believe, when they gave the operational response plan, they did an audit. They estimated that based on the policy and how it was written, half of the books would. That is kind of how it's looking. And I understood that. I was horrified by that, but some of the board seems to have been surprised by that. Even I saw a letter from one of the county council members that said they were being told by board members that number was an exaggeration. I didn't think it was an exaggeration. I've read teen books. I sometimes read young adult books now. And so I knew that a lot of books were going to get moved. They didn't listen. The librarians and Edra tried to explain, are you sure this is what you wanted to say? And they went ahead. And then they act surprised once people start finding out what's going on. And yeah, the whole thing. It's very expensive. It shouldn't have come as a surprise that all these books weren't going to get moved. You were warned and you said, do it anyway. And also, again, hours have been spent by the public speaking and showing concerns, and it's been completely ignored. And in fact, prior to today, for many meetings, you would go ahead and vote on things and then listen to public comment at the end of the meeting. So.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hunt. I am from Fishers, and I just want to say, I am not sure responding to public comments is a good idea. Michelle makes a good point, with maybe talking with people after the meeting is a better idea, but being combative with people expressing their comments during the comment is not a good look, especially when we are discussing hiring a PR firm to fix our image. All of these people have been coming for months and have been telling you how they feel. And whether you agree with it or not, coming at somebody while they're standing up here talking isn't fair. So that is all I want to say.
Thank you. And that's the end of public comments. Are we on legal counsel now? Fantastic.
No, the amended agenda is the new board resolution.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
All right, so I circulated a proposed board resolution. I understand there might be some comments, particularly maybe amendments to it, but in the spirit of the resolution, here's the place to do that. So just to get discussion rolling, I'll go ahead and move that we adopt that resolution.
I'll second.
All right, so just to get the ball rolling, I guess it's no secret that this board's had some problems recently. The last couple of years, there's been a bit of dysfunction. And I think the first step in resolving that and working together as a board and resolving that dysfunction is to start actually working together as a board again. 2 years ago, when I was put on this board, we'd all sit down, we'd come together, 7 of us. Any member could bring an issue to discussion. We talk about it for the first time at those meetings, and we get work done. And the board worked really well. It was very harmonious, and I feel it's in a much better place than it is now. So to get us back there, I've drafted a resolution. It essentially, I know one of the board members or one of the audience members was commenting on it in public comment. But that's a document I got when I was assigned to this board saying, okay, what's our role of board members? And this resolution is kind of meant to essentially mirror that. Say, hey, we're all individual board members. We speak and act as one board, and none of us individually have a right to run the library between meetings, spend the library's money. That's the board's job, and we do that here together. So that's the resolution. I think we should adopt something like that. I understand there might be some potential amendments, but I want to get the ball rolling.
Any more comments?
Yes, in concept, I like the idea in terms of clearly stating when the board president or a member of the board can direct or cause money to be spent. But I have a little problem with this because this is a very broad statement of that. For example, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for telling me. This is it's very broad. And so, for example, we were talking just before the meeting about, oh, we need to have a poster for the rules of the meeting. Well, does the board president then have to, during the meeting, have to have the board vote on that? I mean, it's a trivial thing. It's something that's, as the meeting manager, which is one of the primary jobs of the board president. I mean, I would think she'd be able to request
I
it.
would prefer the board, discuss that before we go with posters.
You know,
Sorry,
I appreciate your comment, but
Yes.
we're having a discussion here.
Yes, sorry.
But the point then, so does that mean that she has to do that? And then what about the event where something comes up that requires a statement that really needs to be reviewed by the lawyers? Does the board president how does she convene the board to get the authority to have them spend the time to do that particular thing? What
kind of statement are you talking about?
Let's say there was a fire or there was an incident or something that required more than just a direct response, a board response. And she wanted to get, she in this case, wanted to get a review by the lawyers. I mean, how does she do that? So I think that and then the point about personally reliable and going to send this to all the contractors, I really think those things need to be, I just think it needs to be reviewed by the law firm when it comes in. I'm not against something like this to define the things, but I think this is overly broad. It has some conditions in it that I think merit more legal review before we take action on it.
So for the sake of discussion, just if I can respond to a few of those points, I think this is naturally flexible and that it restates, I think, what the law is and what the guidelines are. And it specifically says in here, the board can authorize individual board members to do things in those circumstances. But I do understand wanting to make some maybe exceptions or an amendment. Now, I know talking about trivial things, there are some trivial things, but this didn't happen because of trivial things. This happened because of spending large amount of money from individual board members authorizing law firms essentially to act as their own PR agents, which that wasn't appropriate, I think. There could be some discussion of exceptions. I think this policy makes allowance for exceptions as authorized by the board that we discussed. But if we have an emergency, maybe a proposed friendly amendment, maybe in the event of an emergency in which a special session can't reasonably be called, is urgent, then maybe the board president can take some sort of defined action with the consent of the vice president or something, just so there's more than one board member involved, not one person acting, something like that.
Right, I want to comment on a couple of things thank you, Craig, with posters and statements. So as far as statements coming from this board, they shouldn't, in my opinion. No one on this board is a spokesperson for the library. Edra is a spokesperson for the library. In fact, I think our media relations policy states that. Does it not, Edra? And I know I'm putting you on the spot with that.
I would have to look. I don't think we ever put a media relations policy in place.
Or there is something in your job description.
Yes, it is in my job description. Yeah.
I think it is in your job description that you are the spokesperson for the library. I would like to get away from individual board members serving as spokespeople for this library and for this board. It is not our role to do so. Secondly, posters seems like a minor issue, although for months I sat in front of posters that I didn't understand the point of them, the expense of them. I asked a couple of times why we were sitting in front of those posters and no one ever gave me a good reason. So posters can be controversial. I'll put that out there as well. I think the resolution is important based on mistakes this board has made in the past, and to avoid them moving forward, we could approve it today with a pending legal review. And that's what I suggest.
In the absence of legal review, that's what concerns me, is that we don't have legal counsel. And to me, it's like, we can have this tabled until we do get legal counsel. I think that, while I appreciate you drafting the resolution, I think that, we should let our legal counsel help us with those resolutions.
In the
I think that-
meantime,
I think in a bit, we're putting the cart before the horse just a little bit. I do recognize that there were some things that happened under our last president, but I think we've all learned a lesson and understand what's out of bounds.
no, I don't think we agree on what's out of bounds. I don't think we do agree. I think for the past couple of weeks, you've been stepping out of bounds. That's what I believe.
Well, there's a lot of power that the president has. I mean.
No, Mike,
Yeah, I
have
mean,
you
she's
read that
She's
policy?
the president. We elected her to do the job as president. You've got to give her some ability to do the job outside of always convening a board meeting to make any decisions. We wouldn't be able to get anything done as a board if we have to say, hey, you really don't have any power. It has to be unanimous, consent if we're gonna do anything. I mean, if we're gonna make any decision, you can't do this. It's gonna hamstring the.
The only thing, I
The
appreciate that.
effectiveness.
What we have done is we've made no decisions. We've had a couple of calls with legal counsel. Certainly, we all could hop on the calls, but everybody does have day-to-day jobs. There have been some events that have happened and they caused for some different kinds of planning. To be specific, there was the inquiry from the New York Times, and there was the need to get them a response. And what I learned as we were preparing that was that there was no standard information that was being provided. And that also, initially, we were going to provide 2 sets of meeting minutes. And I think for a journalistic body like the New York Times, providing 2 sets of meeting minutes about a situation and topic that's been going on for a year and a half was not fairly portraying our library or our community. So from that, we had a conversation about drafting a frequently asked question document. Also, when we had one call with legal counsel, they recommended that we get a PR firm, actually 2. One of them has one that works with them.
The
So-
legal firm, our former legal firm. who
Actually,
quit,
the
is-
former legal firm, and then also one of the ones that we spoke with,
recommended we hire a PR firm.
did some PR support.
Since when is PR a lawyer's specialty?
It was in the context, we asked the question and they were giving us advice. What you're missing is that it was the quest for information. No decisions were made, nobody was hired, and no resources were committed. As board president, it's my job to plan and to understand the needs of the board and the needs of the library. That is simply all we're doing, is trying to make sure that the library is in the best situation possible. There have been times where things have happened and there was no response. There was absolutely no response. And certainly to protect the image of the library, that can't be.
No response to what? To media requests?
Yeah, lots
Do
Media
you think
requests.
that the library feels that we?
Misinformation that's been going around too.
Right, Mike, that there's been a lot of
And
misinformation.
that's coming from your side. It's coming from your side. It absolutely is. And so, and just so you know, like, I'm not gonna be silent as a board member. I mean, if you want us to like not address what's going on, I mean, just keep our mouths shut. No, that's exactly what you want us to do. So that way you guys can push whatever narrative you want to
Anyone
push.
keep their-
About content that is in the children's section. I mean, this is what we have to respond. We have to respond. This is the problem. We all are individually appointed by elected members of our community. We have a right to say what we want to say based on their appointments.
And to Micah's comments, I don't think that's implicated in this policy. All of us have a right to speak to whoever we want to.
Sure.
Appointing authorities, members of the public.
And I don't think we've made any like board statements, like actual statements say, hey, as a board, we agree this. I've never said that. Have you said that?
No, I haven't, but Laura paid money to our legal firm to write her media releases that she would then go and revise. We shouldn't be asking lawyers to write media.
Well,
We
the
should-
highlight is we have a new president and we have no legal counsel. So I think that the idea with this meeting was for us to secure legal counsel so that we could chart a course ahead. I appreciate all the comments that were made earlier, but we really have to understand where we are and look forward.
Yes, I really
I
think
do
we should.
agree.
I really think we should table this until we have it. I'm not against discussing this and trying to put something like this in and making it clear what the bounds are of the president. But this has a lot of content in it that I think deserves to have a lawyer review.
Well, we currently don't agree on the bounds of the president. So until something like this is passed, we won't have agreement.
So
Why don't we talk about in the interim, what you expect of the president, okay? And then we'll use that as the guideline to, until we get something official that we all agree upon.
So here's the proposal. I've got this resolution. I know, sounds like a lot of the comments were geared towards paragraphs 3, 4, and 5.
Yes.
Number 1 and 2, we essentially say, hey, us as a board, we're affirming that we act and speak as a single governing entity, which I think is the law. Then number 2 is saying, except as explicitly authorized by the bylaws or other formal action of the board, individual board members are not authorized to exercise the powers of the board. I don't see how that's controversial. So what if we get something like that on paper today, and then we bring it up to legal counsel so we can fill it out and,
So what, Mike, 1 second, Audrey, were you gonna say something?
I was just, no, I'd prefer Craig to finish out his thought before I.
oh yeah,
share mine.
I mean, I think we're looking at paragraphs 1 and 2. I don't see how those are particularly controversial. In my mind, there's just a statement of the law. We get that on paper today, and then first meeting, we have new legal counsel, we bring it back up, we fill it out, we work on it, we finish it. But I think it is in the interest of the board, and I think we need to get something on paper guiding us about what we as individual board members can do between meetings. I don't want, it's not my role to run the library between meetings. It's not the president, it's not the vice president, it's not the secretary. It's none of our roles to run the library between meetings.
Correct.
We need to have something in place. So when we get legal counsel, then we can fill it out. But once we have legal counsel, I don't want individual board members spending money or setting policy or running the library, setting events. That's
No one's
not
gonna do it.
appropriate.
But, okay, let me just ask them, like, give directions to library staff. So if a board member asks questions of Edra or another staff member to provide data, or, for example, ask Kevin to provide an additional summary of something that's going on with the building, is that going to be prohibited by this? Give directions to library
It
staff?
should go through EDRA. All requests should go through EDRA. That is stated in public
Does
trust.
anybody have a copy of the bylaws? I mean, doesn't your resolution reference the bylaws?
Yes, they do. It incorporates the bylaws except as authorized by the law. So this is saying something other than authorized in the bylaws.
Why does anyone believe that they need to direct any member of EDRA staff other than EDRA?
So what if we?
Well, no, it's not direct. It's direct a question to Kevin, direct a question to someone else who's working on
All of that should come through.
all that.
Yes,
Okay, so you're saying all that should come to you. Okay,
that's in the document that is being referenced, the in public trust that we all received when we joined this board.
Yeah, so I think as board members, I think EDRA has a responsibility to cooperate with us in doing our duty as board members, asking questions, asking for information. But when a board member's telling EDRA, now set this up, or EDRA do this, then I think we need to be looking to the board for that, not individual board members. So when I wrote direct the board, I wasn't referencing questions. I was talking about giving EDRA essentially instructions to manage the library in a certain way. And if EDRA is not meeting expectations and answering board questions or providing board with information and facilitating the role as board members, then she's accountable to us. And that can be brought up at the next meeting. So I guess my proposal would be, what if until we get legal counsel, we strike 3, 4, and 5, we adopt 1 and 2, and then we put this on the agenda soon again.
Yes, I agree, but we have to vote, so.
Okay, so I'll revise my motion that we adopt paragraphs 1 and 2 of the resolution that was circulated.
Yeah.
Second,
All in favor?
I,
Quick more discussion on that.
Sorry.
So a lot of the public commentary and a lot of things we've been hearing and in fact, the way you ended our last meeting and talking about conciliation and coming together. Tiffany, I agree. Part of the board president's job is to plan, to form the agenda, to call meetings and to be thinking about that. So gathering that information and talking to Edra about, hey, let's have this set up, let's have this person ready to speak. The 7 of us are gonna need to do that. So I agree with you there, but I also hear and understand where Michelle's coming from, that we don't want to repeat some of the major missteps, especially when it comes to financial doings. So ultimately, I think this is some of the better conversations we've had, where we're actually talking and listening to each other. And I think the resolution as amended is very positive in that direction. We can talk more about 3, 4, and 5, those being more controversial, especially since it uses the terms personally liable. And so I wouldn't want that to be weaponized in any sort of way. But, you know, if we're asking for information, Ray wants some information about, you know, we're gonna have a buildings and grounds committee meeting and we need to know some certain information. Yes, that's asking for it. But I think so much of our problems come down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what the 7 of us represent, versus Edra. She is the executive. She operates the library day to day.
Yes.
If there's an emergency, she responds to it. She operates under the policies and the general direction that the 7 of us established through resolutions and policies that we enact. We don't sit every day. She does. And I think that's keeping that context in mind is important as we move forward.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Any other comments? So what, we'll entertain a vote on the motion? Can you repeat the?
Yes.
1, 2, and?
Just 1, 2.
1 and 2. Can somebody read those?
Sure, I have it right here.
Oh,
go ahead.
I could
You
read it.
got
All
it.
right.
Go ahead.
Paragraph number 1, the Hamilton East Public Library Board of Trustees, the board, affirms that the board speaks and acts as a single governing entity. Paragraph 2, except as explicitly authorized by the bylaws or other formal action of the board, individual board members are not authorized to exercise the powers of the board. Without express authorization of the board, individual board members shall not direct the operation of the library, give directions to library staff, contractors, or professional service providers, or incur expenses or other liabilities on behalf of the board or the library.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Legal counsel?
Yes, that is it.
As you know, the library is currently without legal counsel. Edra contracted the firms interviewed by the board in February of this year to see if they were still interested in the contract. 2 of the 3, Taft and Krieg DeVault, are still interested and provided updates to their proposals from February, and they were sent to the board last Friday. Edra and I had a short virtual meeting with representatives from Krieg DeVault. At this time, I will open general discussion on this matter.
It looked like materials you'd sent us were basically their proposals that we had from January or February.
There was a personnel change from Taft. They have a different council.
Okay.
But I believe that they were substantively similar in every other.
No change in the dollars and cents.
I guess, big picture, I guess the first decision in my mind are we trying to make a decision on this today? Do we want to interview or do we want to limit ourselves to these 2 proposals? Do we want to try and look for more?
I think it'd be good to maybe look for some more. It's always good to have, I think we can be patient with this and I'd love to see more than just 2 personally, so.
I would advocate for acting on it because it seems that everyone is a bit hesitant to move forward with things unless we have legal counsel and we have the collection development policy to think about. Are we required to reissue an RFP?
We're not required to issue an RFP at all for legal services. It is the type of service that is not subject to like low bid. A lot of it has to do with fit, right? Fit. And I think that it is probably, I mean, I think we did it in an attempt to like be as transparent as possible and to really dig down into being able to compare.
So as we went through this last week, we came to the point where we had three options. Was one, put somebody on retainer, just to get us through the end of the year, and then maybe do the full exercise in January or February of reviewing, calling other firms in. Number two, we could choose between the folks who wanted to work with us and, what was the third option?
I think it was getting somebody in interim contracting.
Yeah.
Or like looking for someone maybe just hourly.
Correct.
As for a case by case, like for the things that do come up.
Yes.
Asking for legal review, but that would not give us counsel at the meeting.
Correct.
But we could send at an hourly basis. We would, yeah, so I think that was probably the.
Yeah.
Could we, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I didn't have it. I asked Laura she had some notes about how we ranked them, so let me just go through that. Micah, you had Barnes, Creek, Quinn, this was it.
Clark Quinn?
Clark Quinn, thank you. I could get the first one. Clark Quinn, Creek, and Taft. Craig, you were Barnes and Thornburg, Clark and Quinn, Krieg, and Taft. Andre was Barnes, Krieg, Clark Quinn, Taft. Michelle was Barnes, Taft. Clark.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't?
No, they were my fourth.
You were their fourth. Was Krieg your second one?
Clark Quinn was my second, Craig DeVault was my third, I remember that.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. She had that next.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I had the spreadsheet, but I couldn't find it.
That's okay.
Okay, so Tiffany was Barnes, Krieg, Taft, and Clark Quinn. I was Barnes, Taft, Clark Quinn, and Krieg. Taft was generally finished last in the.
Well, I think that's, if I remember correctly, it's just because they were pretty expensive, weren't they? Weren't they the most expensive?
No, Ice Miller was.
Ice Miller was, no.
We didn't have ice miller.
Yeah, we didn't have that.
Creek was, I believe, the most expensive.
Of the group, yeah.
Okay.
Krieg finished, so that means Krieg finished third, second, and third, basically.
Clark Quinn is off the table.
Clark Quinn actually finished most of the time second. They
Yeah,
came at time.
they
They're
did
not
not.
interested.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
So that's how we rated them the last time.
And the difference between the two is one price. And then one of them will not help us with any, First Amendment issues.
Correct.
Which one's
that?
Creed DeVault will not, do any First Amendment work for us.
And Taft
they
has
say why?
requested that we move the meeting earlier.
Yeah, and then with Taft, it comes in at a lower price point. They will do First Amendment work with us, but the meetings will have to be at 3 p.m. to accommodate council,
I don't think they gave an exact time, but yeah,
Yeah.
afternoon meetings.
to accommodate council.
Did Creek DeVault comment on the First Amendment matter? They don't have expertise or what?
They are not interested in consulting on that matter. That's really all they told us.
Mhm.
I don't like the idea that, they're restricting the meeting time because they.
That's not Creek, that's Taft. I think it's
Which
what
was
she said. Taft is
Yeah,
restricting
that's
that.
it, yeah. So, I'm not sure about that. I don't like that. I don't know what that just doesn't sit well.
It accommodates council.
Well,
I don't think it was a deal breaker, but I think it was a request.
Yeah.
yeah.
Doesn't sit well with me, right?
No,
You want to, frankly, Bill, when school get out.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
at 3:40, right?
Yeah, so
So that doesn't seem, do they have another council they would propose? Did they? It sounds.
It's just a general question.
I think it at least deserves another sit-down interview with these people and just sort of go through these sort of questions, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Don't you feel that way, at least with these two?
Yeah, so I'd be interested in talking with them both. I wish we could find some more. I think anyone who has thoughts on who else we could reach out to, I think
The
that would
county
be helpful.
council. Who's their counsel? Is it Jeter?
It's not Swami and Jeter. Yeah.
Have we asked them?
They didn't even make it to the table when Ray and Laura and I reviewed.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, their proposal was very short and didn't really, they just said, we're, Jeter and Masamami, and that was it.
So, okay.
But we may, I mean, I can, for this interim period, I can reach out and try to get us just someone hourly to give us some advice who has some expertise in this area. What I did last time was I relied on the State Library Council, and they're limited in what they can advise on.
Yeah.
But that's an option. I mean, I could certainly call Chris Jeter and say, hey, would you mind?
Andrew, what sort of parameters did the state have?
Just they're, because it's the state library attorney, they're unwilling to comment on like very specific local things. Like they'll give me information about a vendor law, like here's how a vendor law works. But if it's something that's very specific to our community, they would prefer that you rely on local counsel. So.
Like, I don't know, collection development policy.
Yeah, they would comment on that. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
So, yeah, and then just having some, I mean, we're probably gonna have to go back and rehire the lawyer who was our construction person. I mean, that would make the most sense that,
I can reach out to him.
yeah.
He
I
knows that,
mean,
if that's a concern right now.
yeah, because he has the most understanding of what went on. If that's okay, I would suggest that we do that right away.
Is there consensus on that?
Put him on retainer?
Well,
No, he would just be our construction.
Just,
attorney
yeah.
for
Just
construction.
for construction.
Yeah.
just for construction.
That might
And
cover
it was, that
Yeah,
was the
like
guy, okay,
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so, but I think we should cement that one because we never know what's gonna
I
happen.
will see if he's interested.
Okay,
I wonder if, I know CCHA did not do the RFP when we issued it, but I wonder if, like, we're talking about the retainer temporary, if they would be interested.
I can certainly find out. I did reach out to the council. I asked all the other libraries in our county who their council was, and I reached out to them and no one was interested. So, and that did include CCHA.
I know they're the Noblesville School Board
So,
attorney
yeah.
and
they were all, felt like they just didn't have the capacity to.
HER?
Church.
CCHA,
No,
HER.
talking about
Church, no.
HER, Kroger Gardens and Regis.
I don't think I have them on my list.
It might be.
well, if we do that, then we have
Just
to,
something hourly.
we have to dust off the RFP.
Well, I think that it's also worth a discussion among this board of what do we really need from legal counsel? Because I think that maybe we're over lawyered a little bit. We don't have to have attorney approval for every policy. That's a library policy. It's generally that is just a cursory review, making sure that there are no liability concerns and that more general counsel can handle. And I think some of the things that you spoke about earlier about how counsel is being used by individual board members, some of that maybe is beyond the scope. I don't know. That may be a discussion to have about the scope of that RFP and to maybe look and see what's more customary for public libraries. And we need to look at public libraries our size because we are larger than most other public libraries. So making sure that we're comparing apples to apples is important.
What about, let's see, Jeter, and was there anyone else? What else did we throw out from the original file?
Ice Miller because they were so.
Ice Miller because they
expensive.
expanded.
Yeah.
We had a limited response to the RFP in the first place. There weren't that many responses. And I think it may have been because of the complexity of the RFP and the breadth of what we were asking
Well,
for.
It's probably worthwhile. It's probably worthwhile to pulse Jeter and see if they would give a more complete response to our RFP.
Well, I think maybe that, again, I think that this is worth a board discussion about do you really need a firm that can do all of those things? Or do we want to consider for things that are unusual, like construction matters, looking for an attorney that handles that rather than trying to get it all in one shop, which was the request of the RFP.
Well, look at it this way. They were talking on the order of $30,000, $50,000 a year. So if you have the spot, you bring somebody in, they're gonna have X number of hours, they gotta get up to speed and then address what we're asking. Is that gonna be cheaper in the long run? We have a lot of-
I would just like to say that for the last 10 years, prior to the last 2 years, our costs for legal were less than $10,000 a year.
Well,
So I
we
think
had
that,
Ann, yeah.
yeah, I think that we really need to, maybe this is something that we can do a little bit more investigating into to determine what do we need? And is what we are asking for, like, again, is that too much or not? And I don't have the answer to that for this board, but I know that I feel like part of that limited response was due to, again, the complexity and the breadth of the RFP and what we were asking for, which was well outside of what libraries would typically ask for.
I think that's an excellent point. I know we operated with Ann for a long time and it was terrific. Ann knew how to run the meetings. She could handle our basic needs, but when construction stuff came up, she had great recommendations for other council that worked well, cut costs. So maybe we do consider throwing a wider net and saying, hey, we want general counsel that would be able to give us those kind of referrals.
It's a good idea. So where does that leave us? That leaves you with a list of people to reach out to, Edra? Yeah.
So what is the action exactly then? What did we agree to do?
So that's a good question.
Yeah.
So I think that what I heard was that I need to find an interim solution for someone who will work with us on an hourly basis to do the things like review this document so that we can move forward with it. And if we have, and with Mike Cavosi to make sure that we secure construction counsel.
That's a separate.
Right, but those are two things that I need to do.
Yes.
Is have that, try to find an interim general counsel option that would probably honestly be hourly. It would be a very simple kind of agreement. It wouldn't have a retainer, it would be an hourly rate. And then this board needs to decide exactly what are the legal needs that we have. What are we wanting from our council? And is it still what's in the RFP? Because I think the RFP that we put together was more school maybe based or local government, which are larger, right? The scope is larger for the county and for the school system who has hundreds of employees than for a library. So I think maybe those things, and I can get some of those from other libraries and provide them to the board, and we can go from there.
And if we're going to agree to the temporary retainer council, maybe not our permanent council, I just don't want that to be a reason that we delay resolution on the collection development policy. So if we agree to have someone in place that might be temporary retainer through end of 23, that doesn't mean, I hope, that we're gonna wait until 24 until we have our real lawyers to resolve that. So I'm just putting that out there.
But then also we'd have to make sure that they'd want to work on that too, or they felt comfortable.
Yeah, I think it
Kind of
depends on what
oversee.
it is you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
Is it to find language to restrict the collections legally, or is it to say, is this draft we've come up with, does this meet? Are there any liability concerns that you have? Because those are two very different things.
Yeah.
I think it's more towards the liability.
And I think that our current policy has been reviewed for that already. If you're looking at using that as a base and just removing, then I don't know how that would add liability.
Yeah,
But I can certainly ask, if anybody would just be looking at it with an eye toward, is this, you see any defaults here?
So, do you think that Taft would do something on retain, or not retain, but interim for us through the end of the year?
I just either one would.
I would not support that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
What was the
not Taft,
what was the reasoning behind?
because they charge us an enormous amount of money for a section of our policy that is now paused because it's caused so many issues. And they would not answer my questions when I asked several at the meeting back in December when that section of the policy was approved by this board.
I only mention them just because they had a hand in it.
Mhm.
And, you know, they got us into it, you know. They'd be helpful and they'd have a lot of the knowledge, so.
Go add, Jeter and Masamani, and add if they want to do a retainer for the end of the year. I mean,
Yeah,
because,
I have that written down already.
Okay.
The contact to include, to reach out to Chris. Chris used to be on our board, so maybe they'll throw us a deal.
yeah, I mean, that's the positive thing about that. Okay, so.
So you want me to see if anybody would be willing to just pinch hit for like, just say the rest of the year on an hourly basis?
Probably attend the next few meetings at least, okay?
Yeah.
Maybe that could be the start of a good relationship.
Okay, all right. I'll see
Like
what
a
I
trial
can
run, like a test
I'll
run.
see what I can do.
No pun intended.
And is
then
that clear
we-
enough, or do we need a
okay.
motion on that?
I think as long as do you feel like, does everyone feel like there's consensus? I think that's good.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Will you send out the do we need to review the RFP also?
I can send you that so you can take a look at it. And I can also see, I can tell you that my understanding from my colleagues at larger public libraries in Indiana is that they have not typically done RFP processes for attorneys. And that their attorneys, they're not consulting with them very often. It's less usual than usual to have continual connection with their attorney. So, but I know that they have attorneys out there. So, I think that that's a customary, but I'll send you the RFP as written. And I can also send, a couple of I'll dig out like the agreement with previous attorneys. You can see how that compares.
So you sent us Ann's.
Yeah, and that's more typical of what you would see for a retainer agreement for a life.
I think it's more important to start finding, and then don't worry about, you'll catch us up when you get some answers, I think is a better.
So what do you think we will have for our next meeting?
So by the next meeting, I should have some information for you about, attorneys that are willing to work with us on an hourly basis for a finite period of time.
Okay.
Let's see, that's the 24th, we have that, 28th, sorry.
Yeah, I should be able to get something with it.
What
next
about,
week.
targeting, say, the week before, the 21st, to have a short, meeting in the evening to, yay or nay on what you find out?
I'm not sure that that's possible. I think I can get it within 2 weeks. I don't know that I can get everybody within a week. I think I can have information by the Monday of the board week, maybe, or early in that week. But
Okay.
it's always kind of a challenge to have these conversations and.
Okay,
get
well,
people to
keep
sign
us
stuff.
posted on a schedule, and if it
I'll update
goes
you.
faster, then maybe we'll meet
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Our board packet goes out next Thursday, so I should have an update, definitely by then.
Maybe as part of the phone calls, we could just ask for availability for 6:15 on
meetings, yeah.
September 28th.
Okay.
And
Go
then
from
we
there.
would have that information if we were to meet earlier in the week to know who might be available.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the first question. What are you doing at 6:15 on the fourth Thursday of the month, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Live in Fisher. Anything else on this matter? Are we good, Edra?
Yeah, I feel like I have a feel for the consensus of the board. This matter, thank you.
That's start. Moving on to the board retreat discussion.
So Tiffany and I talked about, is it okay if I kind of jump in? Tiffany and I talked about, and I think I've talked with several of you guys before about, I feel like it would be really good for this board to have some time to talk to each other and away from a public meeting where you've got business to conduct, to have time with someone who is an expert on board governance, who can answer questions and provide best practice. And also just have that human being time, right, across the table from each other, where you learn about each other and you're talking about, what do boards do? What do effective boards do? How do we get our meetings less than 3 hours? I think all of us want that. And I actually spoke with Diana Coyle, who is the executive director of HCLA, the Hamilton County Leadership Academy, which has their offices in this building. So it was pretty convenient. She has a strong background in association management and working with nonprofit boards. So she connected me with a few people in our area who are experts in nonprofit governance and do this kind of training all the time. I think that for the purposes of what we're doing, I think having a general nonprofit, not library specific, training and opportunity to have this kind of time for really a deeper understanding. I think that's going to be something that we can then layer the library specific stuff on. So that's what we had talked about, is how useful that could be for the board to have that just baseline training in board governance, and to clarify what is board, what is staff, how does it work differently, you know, in a nonprofit board versus an elected official, for example. So, because those things are different. And then there are different things, again, as a public library, because we are subject to state laws that are different than the laws that govern general nonprofits. But so that is what we had talked about.
Sure.
Tiffany I think we were very much on the same page. We're thinking this would be a good thing.
Yeah. Did we ever get the answer as to whether or not we could do it publicly or not?
No, I need to get this. That is what I can talk to the state library attorney about, is finding out, can this be a training opportunity that's just the board?
Yeah.
So we'll find out.
Yeah, that was the big question. Okay, so we got,
Would it be for nonprofit board training? Would it be somebody that would understand government law and stuff though too? I mean, so that way, because I think that would be good for them to know and have an expertise on to some extent, because nonprofits, like you said, are
Yeah,
covered.
I think that the people that Diana connected me with, I'm actually familiar with one of them. He's actually worked with the Indiana Library Federation in the past, and they do have some familiarity with the unique situation of like open door law and that kind of thing. But that would be a different training. I think we could put someone else in to do that element of the day, perhaps someone from the Public Access Counselor's office or someone from the state library. And that, so most of these people have that passing familiarity with that. It is different.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be something I think we would want.
Someone else to come.
And I think that is important. Because it's easy to, it doesn't always make sense, right? It doesn't always seem the most efficient way to handle things. So making sure we know that, I think it's important.
How long is this, how long is it?
I would say that ideally it's a half day or a full day, like
So
Like
a
a
day or less, let's put it that,
less than one day. Yeah, we're not gonna, I guess we could go to,
8 hours or less.
Would it be,
yeah, it would be a day.
would it be local somewhere?
Yes,
Like, I mean,
that would be the goal. Yeah.
I don't know if you know, there's a place called the Shunem House. Have you ever heard of the Shunem House? They're off on 206, 37 and 206. It's a retreat center, retreat home. It's beautiful, kind of out in the country. We use it for church staff.
Yeah, ideally this would be off-site. It would not be at the library.
Yeah,
But we'll have to find out if it's a public meeting or not.
Yeah.
yeah.
So we can still have it there.
yeah,
But
right,
it would
sure.
be,
Be a lot of other people having a
we can
retreat
zoom
with
it,
us.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I do think though that before, while we're all here, we need a date for everybody, because a whole day is challenging. Here we have a cross-country coach. So, I don't know if anybody has anything calendar with you, this is something we can date for, and then I can work backwards from that date with the facilitators, with the trainers too.
You looking at a weekday?
I don't know that it matters. It can be weekend, weekday, it's better for you. I would be there too, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I would be there too, and I'm open any day we need to do it, so if, we can either do this now, or you can send me, the possible availability you have for a full day, which is probably than when I'm asking for an hour, so.
You hit one.
Yeah.
Day.
Do you have a preferred coordinator for this? If that's the case, we need to work to her schedule.
Schedule. I've got a couple that, the one that I am familiar with is Mark McSweeney from RGF. That they do a lot of board stuff, they do a lot of nonprofit work, and then the other company is Aaron Hedges from Hedges. So I haven't connected with either of them.
So are we talking October timeframe?
I think it needs to be, as soon as it makes sense. So probably October, to give you time to schedule it in. because this is a big time commitment. I understand that.
Well, we can do it on a weekend. I mean, it's because you guys are working, so.
Well, actually,
I'm
we got October break, we've got 2 weeks
Yeah.
off. in
The third,
October.
what does Friday the 13th look like?
Actually.
Get these.
I was gonna say, oh, yeah.
Sure.
I think we can redeem Friday the 13th. Okay, we'll make it good.
So
you're off.
from the 9th through the 20th, we have our October break. Do 2 weeks in the fall. So no, I'll have practice, but be pretty flexible.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry, that October or November?
October,
October 13th.
October,
Yeah, or the 12th, maybe the 20th.
9 through,
You can't do it.
So
What
we're
about the
looking,
18th?
I can't.
I had the 13th, like, yeah, that should work.
I couldn't.
Can't do
Oh,
I can't do the 13th.
Okay.
What about the following Monday, the 16th?
Is everybody working on the 9th? It's Indigenous
I'm
Peoples'
in,
Day.
yeah, I'm in state.
State. The first part of that week, I'm about the state.
16.
16th works for me, 17th, 18th works for me.
so we've got the 16th going live.
16.
16.
16th,
Audrey's like,
I gotta talk to my social
17th?
Yeah.
coordinator and make sure, because I know that's HSA's fall break.
okay,
Oh, you guys.
Make sure
Oh,
I can do the 16th.
okay. So everybody can do everyone can do the 16th so far. Audrey's going to verify. But everyone else is free the 16th. And we'll see what I can do. And I can get more names too from Diana. We started with these two. And she has a lot of contacts in this space, so.
okay, that is the board retreat discussion. Moving on to, if you want to talk about the collection development policy?
I would like to just briefly, in fact, what I want to talk about are I think the really great things that we achieved in 2022 with this policy in terms of the changes and revisions that were made. I want to point to those things because I think sometimes we forget about those things where we did have consensus. And one being, I'm just going to walk through it. This is like a little refresher, a little history lesson here. So we, in 2022, I believe it was the fall, we added a lot of really great, robust language about the role of parents in the collection development policy. In fact, I think there were several of us that wrote paragraphs about what that looked like, and we added all the paragraphs. So we agreed as this board that how important the role of parents is in book selection, and we added that language. That's on page 1. On page 3, we talk about the separation of the teen zone. So that happened in early 2022, way back in February, March timeframe, when the teen zone was divided into high school, middle school sections. We had consensus on that. We also had the nonfiction aging up, aging down. So any nonfiction in the teen zone, if it was high school, it went to the adult section. If it was middle school, it went to the children's section. And at that point, we moved the 2 books that are constantly referenced. One being Let's Talk About It. The second one being, what's the name of it? The second one, do either of you, do you remember? Let's Talk About It, and there's a second book.
Guide to Consent.
Easy Guide to Consent. Those books at that time were moved to the adult section.
That was part of the nonfiction.
That was part of the nonfiction move that happened in February,
The
March.
board approved teen zone reorganization. That was approved by the board in March.
Yes.
In February.
That was approved in February.
It's
Yes,
important to note that only you and Craig were on the board at that time.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, I know earlier somebody was talking about everything that had been done and a lot of the history,
Mhm.
but only you and Craig were on the board at that time.
That's
So we
right.
all don't have the same corporate knowledge. That's all.
No, and that's why
Yeah.
I'm talking about this now.
And I included those documents in the last board dockets. Yeah.
Yeah,
For that reason, because you're right.
Yeah.
And as a board, we respect precedent of previous board members and the actions and policies that they enact, and we reserve the right to change them, right? So I'm just referencing 2022, the things that gain consensus and have been changed within the collection development policy, and that was one of them. Then if we look to page 8, we had the implementation of the review committee. So this is in response to a request for reconsideration. If a patron isn't pleased with the librarian's state, then we assemble a committee. That's what happened with Craig and Brad and the patron, looking at why. So that is a new addition in 2022. So I bring this up because there are some things that happened in 2022 and changes made to this policy where we had consensus. Those are a number of changes. The problematic section of the policy is one large paragraph covering page 3 and 4, which is now, we have strike through because it's paused. In addition to appendix A and B, which is strike through because it's paused. So I mention this because I don't think the solution to this is as complicated as maybe we're all making it out to be, because we did positive things with the policy that don't need to change and don't need to go away. It's the one paragraph on page 3 and 4 and appendix A and B that have caused the issues that we all agreed needs to be paused. And so I'd like to act quickly on this, even at the next meeting, and looking at making that a permanent deletion from the policy. That's all I wanted to say about it.
Would you say that you brought up, let's talk about it, like a book like that shouldn't be in the teen section, or in your opinion?
It's not in the teen section.
No,
It
just in the
was
17.
moved in way back before you got here.
Because the content was moved because of content?
It was moved because we looked at nonfiction and we looked at how other libraries handle nonfiction, and there's no subjectivity involved in what's moved. So nonfiction.
So you would say the content's fine for the teen section?
I never have said that about that book. Never.
Okay, but so you're saying it's not fine for the teen section?
I would not want my children to read that book.
Okay, so
I have an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, both girls, and they wouldn't want to read that book. They would decide on their own, they wouldn't want to read that.
okay, so
And as a parent,
do you think there should be standards in the teen section?
my standards as a parent are.
No,
my
that's not what I'm
standards as a
asking.
parent.
Does there a moral obligation for a public building to create a standard of safety for a child? Should you operate that?
Those books were moved, those books.
No, but I'm asking, was it because of content?
It was not.
Okay, so
So let me
Yes.
just, allow me to address this.
Yes.
So I know that people like to talk about, let's talk about
Yeah.
the Easy Guide to Consent. Those are both books that are purpose written. They are nonfiction books to explain how sex works to an adolescent audience. They are not for every family. They're not
Sure.
for every adolescent.
Great.
They are intended for families who choose them to read those books.
Yeah.
That's why that book was purchased for the library. It is a book that is purpose written from a point of view of sex positivity, which is not for everyone. That is absolutely true. When we looked at the teen zone, when we had some of the concerns that were raised, it was really important to the board, and it was really important to me and to the staff that we listen and that we not just dismiss some of these concerns that people had about these different books, but it was also important that we understand that there are books in the library for all different kinds of people, and that we are committed to making sure that our collections are broad and diverse and deep and wide. When we looked at Teen Zone reorganization, we heard from the public that they were concerned about some of the books that were in the Teen Zone. They were concerned about, there was a lot of talk about the very youngest middle schooler maybe picking up a book that was for the very oldest high schooler. And so in order to find a compromise, in order to find a way to better send the message about what are these books for, we looked at different libraries and we looked at different ways to approach that. And one of the things that was true at the time and still true, I guess, is that there was the section of nonfiction that was shelved in Teen Zone was a small subset of the totality of the nonfiction that this library holds for middle school and high school readers. And the majority of those books that are geared toward middle school and high school readers were already shelved in our general collection for the high school readers and in our juvenile nonfiction collection for the middle school readers. So in order to make sure that those books were handled in the same way, we determined that it made sense to take that very small collection of less than 1,000 titles out of the 13,000 that we have in Teen Zone and include those with the rest of the books that were for those audiences.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Since the young adult nonfiction was moved, has there been any feedback, any issues, anything from young people being able to find information?
I don't believe so. I mean, we have individual, everyone's experience is different. Our staff stand ready, as they do always, to help people find what they're looking for when they can't find it. And again, much of the totality of those books were already shelved in nonfiction, and the use case for nonfiction is different than the use case for fiction. So we felt like that still provided the access. I don't believe we've seen any change in circulation statistics. In fact, the Teen Zone nonfiction collection had abysmal circulation. No one was going there to get nonfiction for teens anyway. So I believe we've been tracking it, and I don't think it's gone down, but it was never a really high traffic collection anyway. And then the other thing that came out of that discussion was exactly what you're talking about. Like, there were people who were concerned that their middle schooler might go, see these books, and this is for a high school student. It's okay for like a 17-year-old, but what if my 11-year-old finds it? And that's really where we looked around and we determined that, people don't know what teen means, right? They don't know what young adult means. What does that mean? But they have a good idea of middle school, high school, right? When you talk to a parent, they kind of know what it means when you say your child is middle school age. They kind of understand that range. And so we felt like middle school and high school was a natural way to sort those books so that parents and readers would have an expectation of the type of maturity level of the content and be able to kind of gravitate toward that section that made sense for them, that made sense for their families. One of the things that is true of a lot of fiction for adolescents is that it deals with difficult topics. That's part of the point of the young adult genre. And so as you move from the middle school books aimed at middle schoolers into high school, you do get more of that, of those elements. So you have profanity and you have sexual content, because that's what these kids are living with in their lives. So that really seemed to us to make sense. So people would go to the sections that were for those groups, and they would understand, okay, in the high school section, mature content. And also, the books have jacket flap copy that kind of talks about what those themes are. And so we did that that took us a few months. So we got it done by the end of June of 2022. And we haven't had any requests for reconsideration on teen books since then. Zero. Well, that's not true. We've had a request for reconsideration to move back The Fault in Our Stars from adult to teen, and we have a request for moving for Alaska back as well. But beyond that, we haven't. We've heard from parents who have appreciated the middle school section. They come in and like, I got a 7th grader, where do I go? And our staff have reported that's been helpful for them when people are coming to talk to them as well. So we feel like that really took care of some of those concerns. As far as like specific content, again, when you're talking about a range, when you're talking about a section that is for a general age group, you're going to have things that are not in line with your, with my personal family values, with your personal family values. And that's part of navigating the world with your teenagers. It's part of determining, you know, what have we taught you and how does that manifest in the world? So having those changes, we feel was a positive change to some of the things, some of the concerns that were raised. We've also, prior to the policy changing, we had already, you know, we're constantly working on the collection. It's not just we get a book, we stick it on the shelf, we forget about it. We're constantly using these books. We're constantly working with the public to find the books, and we're looking for things that are that we run into snags with, or that we're like, well, yeah, you know, maybe we need to rethink this. And one of the things that we had already started doing prior to policy changing was we had already determined to create a manga collection in our general collection. And some of the initial books that were in there were manga is like graded by the publisher for different age groups. And one of those age groups is older teen. And so we had already started the process of creating a general collection, manga collection, for some of those older teen titles that they tend to, really the issue with them often is violence. But there's some content in there that can be sexual too. So one of the things that we would likely not do is relocate that older teen manga that was moved post policy change. We would probably just maintain all of that in the general collection, in the manga collection. So that's to Michelle's point about things that we don't need to change back. I think that's one of them, but this is all part of the work that we as librarians do. We're constantly listening to the community. We're constantly looking at our collections and deciding, okay, how might this make more sense? How are we going to locate these books so that they are with an eye toward respecting the community and the voices we hear from the community, but also we need to make sure they remain accessible. This is our primary concern. Can the people who need this find this, paired with what is best practice? How do we make sure that we're serving this entire community, regardless of, you know, if we want to make sure that, you know, that Michelle, you're finding the books that you and your family want. Micah, we want to make sure we find the books that you and your family want. We have a lot of people come in and talk about wanting more Christian books, and we want to hear that because we want to do that, but that's not new. That is what we've always done here at the library, is been responsive to patron requests and to the community. And that manifests in the way that we manage our collections. It's not always big and splashy, but it's something that we've always done.
And that was one of the things when we talked on the phone last week about being more open and more communicative about the things that you guys do to manage the collection and listening to the community. I think in a lot of this conversation, that's not something that was always heard. You know, you guys are always evaluating the collection and doing things and being in tune, but that's something that I think may have gotten lost in the last year or so.
Right, and I think that is something that we continually report. It's in all of my director's reports. We talk about it here, but you're right. Sometimes it's hard to get through the noise, right?
Sure, but that's a big part of a lot of these meetings, a lot of these people, the reason why they're here is to understand about the collection. I don't think many people are here because of legal counsel, but, you know, I think being more open about what your staff is doing around the collection, like pulling it out of the director's report and sharing it, I think is helpful.
I think part of this too is that this is what we bring. This is what professional librarians do. It's part of the work that we do. It's what we bring every day. It's the expertise that we bring, and it's not simple.
Sure.
It's not cut and dried. It's not, well, if it has this word in it, just move it. Well, there's more to it than that. It's about context, and it's about intention, and it's about, you know, making sure that we're serving everyone. And I think that gets lost sometimes.
I guess my question is like the high school section.
Yes.
I mean, before this policy was here, what justified saying, okay, a book, this isn't really for high schoolers anymore? Where is that bar? Where's that line that you would look at as a professional and say, okay, now it's time to move it? I'm just looking for, where was the standard? What is the standard?
So again, we're talking about, let's talk about it again. And again, that is not for everyone. But everyone in this room can find something in our collection that is not for the whole family.
I'm not saying remove, let's talk about it from the library.
Well, what
I'm just saying, is that appropriate for?
It is purpose written for an adolescent audience.
But where does it go?
In this community?
Where does it go? I'm seeing some board.
In this community,
Yeah.
it goes in the general nonfiction collection where
Yeah.
all of our other nonfiction for that audience is. And so we wouldn't not buy it because it's for teens. But our teen collection is limited, it's small. So we want to make sure that what we focus on in our teen collection, what we have chosen to focus on is fiction.
Okay, but, and again, before the policy, what's the standard of saying something is now not acceptable in the high school section
So-
and moving it to the, how would you do that?
That's
I'm
really,
asking.
that's part of what the request for reconsideration process is. If, what we do, we have, again, I can't
And when someone
explain,
brings it, and someone does an RFP,
yes.
they come, then what's the standard, I'm sorry, yeah, then what's the standard that, to apply
Okay.
that, like, how would you?
How do
again,
we
before-
review it? What does it
Yes.
look like? Okay,
Yeah.
so the process for a request for reconsideration is multiple steps. And what the staff do is we look at the book, we pull the circulation numbers, like how often is this book circulated? When did we buy it? How many times has it been used? Where is it in other libraries in our area? Right? What have other libraries done with it? We pull reviews. What do the reviews say about this book? Who was this book written for? Do the reviewers flag anything about it? Is there anything in this book that would tell us that maybe we do need to age it up? Because I'll tell you, we do that. We do have books that, there are books in our series that were originally started as young adult, and those have become adult, and those are in our adult collection, right? And so we do evaluate these things all the time, and not always because of an RFR. Sometimes
Yeah.
our staff just are like, okay, this author has kind of moved into the adult, so we're gonna move on. But with the RFR, so we look at that, we look at the reviews, and then we set up a committee, and our librarians read the book. They read the book because what is really important here, and I think one of the challenges with our policy was that it removed context. There was no context around the restrictions in that policy, which is how The Fault in Our Stars ended up getting caught in it, because context didn't matter according to the words of that policy. So what our librarians do is they read the entire book cover to cover. So we're not evaluating whether the picture on page 312 of a 400-page book is offensive to someone. We're evaluating whether in the context of the narrative of that book, in the context of how the information is presented, what the jacket flap copy says, what the catalog says about the book, and how the book reads, does that book make sense where it's currently shelved? And if it does, then the librarians all write a recommendation, and they all write their individual recommendations, and then the committee gets together and they talk about it. And then we determine, okay, we're gonna retain it where it is, or maybe we need to relocate this. Like, we just created a parent-teacher section in children's. And so part of our discussion with a children's book might be, does it make more sense for this to be a parent-teacher collection, or is this book appropriate shelved because of the overall book? We don't relocate something based on a picture on page 37. It or we consider it based on the totality of the work, of literature or nonfiction. So I think that's where we get tripped up with some of these things, is it's just like if you're flipping through channels and you're like, oh my God, what is that? Well, it's the one sex scene in top. So you think that the whole movie maybe is about sex when it isn't, it's just that one scene. So I think that having these out of context things can really be shocking in a way that if you read the whole book and you see this scene in the context of the narrative, you understand it and it doesn't stand out. So, but that process then results in a response to the patron. And then we have part of what we put into this new policy is that if a patron still thinks, no, this needs to move, then it goes to the board. And the same kind of thing happens with the review committee, and then the board makes the final call.
Yes, but I think the question they asked was before we had the policy. Now, you didn't ask about the reconsideration because we wrote that.
Before we had the policy, the book was shelved in nonfiction.
And how was that decided?
I think, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out.
Trying to ask
standards, right?
How
It
is
seems
it
very
decided?
It is subjective, and
Yeah.
the thing is, the standard is that is a book of nonfiction on the topic of sex. So it has images of sex in it because that's the subject of the book. And it's written for an adolescent audience. Is everything in that book for every adolescent? Is it right for my family values? Maybe not, but we serve a community of 180,000 people. Now, I do think that part of the part of the whole thing with changing how we do the nonfiction was to make sure that book was in the right place where people would expect to find it. And when you have a very limited number of nonfiction books that are on one set of shelves in an area without a whole lot of books as a whole, that's perhaps not the best place for all of that nonfiction. And having it in the general collection where the other books for teenagers, for nonfiction for high school audiences makes more sense. We don't move books because we don't agree with the content. That would be unconstitutional.
Right.
No, I
Exactly.
disagree with that. You can shelve a book anywhere you want in the library. That's not
What I'm
a
saying is
constitutional
that
issue.
prior to this policy,
Yeah. Yeah,
that book
it's not
was shelved.
it's not
in
unconstitutional.
So you're saying,
that book was
back
shelved in
in that, you're saying our policy is unconstitutional?
I'm saying that the reason the policy didn't work is because in order for it to not make value judgments about the content, it had to remove all the content.
Okay, but you,
And so it was overly broad.
okay, and now the question is, do you believe our policy is unconstitutional?
I do not believe our policy is unconstitutional.
Okay,
I
just
believe
wanna
that
be clear.
moving a book because of the point of view expressed is.
Yes, and we've
Yes,
talked
that
about
would
that
be,
many
that would
times.
be.
Yeah.
So,
That moving books based on, moving books based upon opinions, we have talked about this many times, then we move into some legal territory. And so
I'm not a
Micah,
lawyer,
when you
let me
ask
just say
me,
that.
what do I think about, well, let's talk about it, it doesn't matter what I think. It's not based on any of our opinions, whether we should move books here.
so standard, right? So anything goes in I'm just trying to figure out where's standard? Like, that's all I'm asking. So we let anything come into the, okay, yeah, that's what you're saying.
He's asking,
So there's gotta be some standard.
And our
How,
standards,
who decides the standard? That's all I'm asking.
standard is in the
It's a simple
policy.
question.
We look at well-reviewed books
Okay,
that are purpose written for adolescent audiences.
so
And we shelve them in that
So the
location.
authors create the standard.
Standard is created by developmental research, by child development. Information that publishers and authors and editors use when they're writing. I mean, you might be able to speak to this as a teen author.
it's basically the publishers, right? Just say the publishers.
No, because that's not.
correct.
Yeah.
So what is the bill? Yeah, so who
Well,
creates
how
the
is it done?
standard?
We all create the standard to some extent. You get to help create the standard.
Okay,
When you come in and say to your child, this isn't for you.
okay, so anything can go into the teen
Not
section,
anything.
and we just as a parent have to say, hey, don't look at that book
That's,
in the
that's
teen section.
sure what you're getting at.
I just wanna know who gets to decide the book goes in the teen section based on the content.
I think we all. In a
Because you said we-
democracy, in a democracy,
Well, we're not a democracy, we're a republic, so there's a big difference. So, it's in a republic. Yeah.
okay,
I mean, that's just what we are. I mean, if you know your
do you
history.
agree that,
It's the board. It's not.
Yeah.
I'm the new guy here. I think you're keep going after this, like, what's the standard? And the standard is set by, and my understanding is by many people. I mean, how does a culture at large have standards? It's by many people.
That's right. We don't let kids go buy guns, right? There's a standard there, right?
Okay.
We don't let kids go into strip clubs. We don't let kids go buy alcohol. Right,
But
there's
states
standards.
places are different. Different places have different standards.
Okay. So that's what I'm asking. I just wanna know,
So
what is our
we're
standard?
all, if you want a one sentence answer to that question, which you seem to be badgering for,
I would like to know. the
you're not getting a
standard.
one sentence answer.
Okay, so is there gonna be, how are we gonna decide? How are we gonna, like, how are we
She
gonna?
just went through it. She went 10 minutes. She went 10 minutes, man.
Okay, so, and still I didn't get an answer. It was very
Is that
subjective.
so what it is that when you look at our collection development policy, it's very clear in there that we err on the side of inclusivity and that we serve a large and diverse community. So when we talk about whether a book is written, like a picture book, for example, you have a picture book, that book is not just, that doesn't just magically appear, right? When you have a picture book, it goes through a process of someone thinks this is a good topic for a picture book. and an editor edits it with an eye toward developmental stages of different ages. So when you write a book for a third grader, it's going to look different than a book for a toddler. And that's part of the editing process. That's part of the writing process. And that's part of what is provided to us as librarians when we see new books come in. And it's part of what the reviewers from libraries all over the country, that's part of what they assign when they're looking at it. So for example, if a book is published by, and Ray kept saying it's the publishers, it's the publishers, it's the publishers. The publishers are providing a piece of information that we as professionals use as a basis decisions that we then make about that book. And no, let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. And so that is taken into consideration when the book is reviewed in professional sources. And then the reviewer, when they're reviewing that book in that context, then they also say, here's our age range for it. And sometimes those are a little bit different. And they all provide us with definitions. Okay, in a library journal, kindergarten through 3 means this. It means there's this kind of language in it. It means there's this kind of word choice. It means there's a limited number of words. It means that it has bright colored pictures. They have definitions for all of that that we as professionals use when we're determining where those are located. And when we talk about teen fiction, we talk about books that are purpose written for a general high school audience, and you have an idea of what high schoolers, like where they are, and there are high schoolers that are 14 and there are high schoolers that are 18, and our high school collection has to serve all of them. So what we don't put in our teen zone are books that are not purpose written for a high school audience. And sometimes there are authors who start out as teen authors who then start writing for adults. And we pay attention based on reviews, based on professional meetings, based on paying attention to the publishing industry, because that's part of what we do. We pay attention to that and we make that determination, and those go into adult at the correct time. And if we miss something and we find it later, we move it then. And also the request for reconsideration process can flag things that maybe we missed, that people can let us know we're concerned about this. But it doesn't mean that if you complain about it, that it's necessarily going to be moved, because our context is broader than that. I hope that answers your question.
So
But what we
with
don't do is make a list of words that aren't allowed.
That's right. And so, I think we're gonna have to come to some standard to where I'm good with there's an RFR, like in somewhere like,
Yeah.
we don't have to move wide swaths of books, but we
Right.
gotta have some standard that when someone comes to us and says, hey, I think this book should be moved, yes, it meets the standard, we'll move it, or no, it doesn't meet the
Well,
standard.
and that's
we'll move it.
exactly what that process is for, because it's not, there is not a black and white. You saw this when we tried to come up with the list of
Right.
words. It's not black and
Not
white.
my- You're right.
It has to be reviewed, and that's why that process exists for those things that are maybe, people don't agree.
But
So we
the
have
book,
that.
let's talk about it, didn't make it into the teen section.
Right.
And so all I'm asking is say, hey, how can we put a gate in place that
There's-
for something that egregious?
So you're saying
Right.
that book doesn't belong in the library?
No, I think that book belongs in the library. I don't think it belongs in the teen section. Would you agree with that?
So what I'm saying is it's not in our, I don't
No,
understand.
it was, but it was. So that's the point. So it was.
And once we heard from the community and had it flagged to our attention and really had a
And we
discussion
didn't
with the
move it
board.
because of content.
But once the board got involved, once we listened to the community, once it became an issue.
So how do we get a gate?
Had-
So that doesn't, so that was, well, how do?
When the
so-
request for reconsideration process that we have now, then that would have taken care of it and flagged, the board would have gotten involved and said, too much, we need to move it. But because we looked at it in a broader context, and we looked at the context of this community, and the board had a conversation and said, you are the librarians, you have expertise in this area. What is a way that we can handle location of books in our library that's going to address some of these concerns that people are bringing to us, to send the message that these books are fine. We're not wanting to remove the book from the library, like you said. This belongs in the library, but you don't want it shelved in the teen zone.
Correct.
Which is a limited space that we want to make sure that the use case for the books makes sense. So nonfiction being in the general nonfiction makes sense for that. So that is the standard that was applied here, is nonfiction, which includes all nonfiction books on the topic of sex. Those are shelved in the general collection. If it's a nonfiction book on the topic of sex for a younger child and is written from a developmental approach, that can go in the juvenile collection or in the parent-teacher collection now that we have that.
And since, I want to make one point about this, and since the new language was out of the policy, the puberty books that got aged down to the children's section, am I right, have been moved to adults?
Correct, so books.
Do you find that puberty books for
I think it was
children are
parent-
inappropriate?
Parent teacher resources. I think that's. that would
Well,
be
they're
great.
there in the
Now,
adult
did all the
section.
puberty books get moved?
Pretty much, yeah.
Because they
have
had
pictures of
nudity.
body parts of them. So they have bare bodies.
Children look in mirrors. They see their bodies every day.
So I think that, but that's something that we can fix with the parent-teacher collection, as long as that policy doesn't stay in.
But as you two have this conversation, it reminds me of what we talked about. We were on the phone for 2 hours last week. Is that we're at the intersection of library science and community standards. And, you know, there's no road ahead. There's nothing that has been done. You know, it's either usually all library science or it's all community-based, and this is what we're gonna do. So, you know, we are really at an intersection, and I don't know, I've always said, I don't know what the answer is, but it's important to have the conversation so that we can figure out the path ahead.
Haven't we had the conversation for 2 years? I've been listening to this community for 2 years,
It's the same.
since Mark Hall. You don't know people beyond this room?
I'm telling you, I hear from hundreds of people all the time saying, hey, thanks for what you're doing. We need something in place to where we have a standard. They want a standard.
Neighbors, mentors in this community.
So
Beyond this room.
let me ask a question. Are the people who come to me and say, we need some standards so that stuff like that doesn't go in the teen section, are they wrong?
You're not wrong, because
Okay.
they have every right to have
Exactly,
standard.
exactly. But
Parenting and
that
family
means you're not
standards.
listening to you're not listening to them express their concerns.
In this room to them, I read.
You're saying that they just need to put up with what you believe is true. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying right now. You're not taking into consideration their heart in this. And I'm saying is, do they have a right to have a concern over the content?
The context.
That's all we're saying.
of their family.
That's not what we're saying. But the other,
Opinion.
but so they just have to suck it up and say, okay, well, if a book like Let's Talk About It, is in there.
I'd like to point out that
Yeah.
Let's Talk About It has not been in the teen
It
collection.
was in the teen collection. But it was.
Another book on the topic of sex education, it will also not be shelved in the teen collection. It will be shelved in the general
And
collection.
what I'm saying is there a standard? We gotta come to what Tiffany was saying. There's a standard that we have to
The
find.
standard is high quality literature that is purpose written
Okay,
based on.
that's the
child
library
development standards.
science. That's library science.
That.
So where's the community, the community
Mike,
standard? We've
can I
got,
speak?
yeah, go ahead. Bill.
I've had, thousands of people talk to me. I've had thousands of people tell me that what I need to do is come in here and vote to end this policy.
I've had thousands of people tell me to put a policy in place.
I would be very surprised.
Yeah, wow.
Where are they coming from? Are they from Noblesville?
They're from Hamilton County,
All
all over,
from
buddy.
Noblesville.
All over Hamilton
So
County.
it's the same people that want the Fault in Our Stars to
So-
stay out of the teen zone too, because that's what this policy did.
We did not, and listen, the Fault in Our Stars should not have been moved. I did not want that book moved. I didn't want that book moved. So.
Actually, I've got an idea. All right, so we've heard a few things. Michelle went over and Edward went over some of the great things we've done. We've divided the sections. We've talked about getting a parent resource section in. We've got a new great request for reconsideration process. We've got something we built on. We built on some things with some high levels of collaboration and consensus. Maybe we're eating an elephant here. What if we start with a few steps? First, I heard from Edra, and I think I've heard before and thought, hey, a lot of the material people are finding objectionable is these graphic novels, the manga. I mean, I think that could be, let me know if I'm wrong, a potential section by itself.
It is, it's the older teens.
Yeah, and we've already determined to leave that in the general collection.
Yes, that was,
There's your standard, Micah.
So yeah, then I guess step two.
Is that all the graphic books?
It is not,
Okay, so what about moving all the graphic books into one section?
then you have the issue where you have books that are purpose written for middle schoolers, right next to books that are written for
Okay.
adults.
See, I'll
Yeah.
amend that, all the teen graphic books. Together with all the graphic book and manga.
They're already like that in Teen Zone, they're in their own.
They're in the
space.
teen zone.
Right.
Are there not, and why isn't that some separate location perhaps?
Those are books, again, they're purpose written for that audience. There's nothing in those books that is outside of the standard, developmental approach to things. Now, if someone finds something
Hold on,
with
you've been.
objectionable, then they can bring it to our attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, excuse me, I need to make this point, because you keep going back to the library science approach to it. There is a written policy in the collection policy that you're supposed to be following. So I want to hear, do those books meet or exceed, meet or not meet that policy? I don't care.
Are you talking about the?
I'm talking about the graphic novels. You said they were purpose written for this age group. Okay, if it's the teen age group, they still get to be, go through the review of the words that we put down.
We're pausing that policy.
I understand.
And
that.
those books have not been reviewed in the context of that policy, because what this board unanimously determined last month, well, let me finish, was that policy was overly broad and resulted in something like The Fault in Our Stars being moved.
I don't think that was the conclusion. I think the conclusion was we would pause the collection policy.
Which we've
That
done.
was as far as we went.
Yes.
And then as far as that concerned, you give us a report every month about how many manga books and graphic novels are reviewed. So those were being reviewed.
Our manga is reviewed.
Okay,
And
good. I want to ask.
in the context of the current policy,
In the
not
current
current policy,
policy.
of
And
the
so when you
paused
do-
policy, the
Okay.
content in those books, there was content in conflict with the policy in at least one volume of all of the
Yes,
series
I
that.
understand.
The
how that's-
majority of that was the older teen, which, as I said, to our discussion about listening to the community and making sure that we're doing things that are responsive. We have no intent, our recommendation would be, even if the policy remains paused or is removed, that the older teen manga would remain in our general collection as our manga collection.
I'm good with that. I want to explore further down. So in the teen collection that
Yeah.
goes from 14 to 18,
High school, yeah.
high school, that's roughly high school, right? I'm talking about the high school.
Yeah, the high
What
school
term should I use to describe it? The
I think high school collection is the most accurate for how we use it.
Okay, I would like that too, because teen tends to have a different age category
Yeah.
to it. Okay, so it's the high school collection.
Yes,
So what you're saying, you're fine with moving, say, the senior, junior graphic level books?
I don't know what you mean by senior, junior.
Well, we're talking about high school. There's freshmen.
Oh, I see what you're
junior.
saying. So are you conflating OT manga as defined by the publisher with junior, senior high school? Because that's not, I don't think that's totally accurate.
The books that are currently
But-
in the high school section,
Yeah.
the graphic books, graphic novels, and the manga books.
So the only ones that have this designation are manga, which are mostly Japanese import,
Okay,
and they have a different cultural standard in Japan. So the OT manga tends to have more violence, tends to sometimes have nudity that is not culturally bothersome, in the same way it is in this community. So that's why we would leave the OT. However, there are
I'm sorry,
level manga
I just
that
want to.
we would want to make sure is relocated to teen. Because it's sort of like The Fault in Our Stars, like the things that are in conflict with the policy
Yeah,
are
again,
less.
I'm very confused. Let me ask a series of questions so I understand.
Okay,
Again, we're talking about, you're saying there's a class of manga novels, graphic novels that are
older teen.
OT is over teen.
Older
teen. Older
Yes.
teen. Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
So those books, do you think are worthwhile to be placed in a separate graphic section?
Sense that the audience for that might include older teen and young 20s.
Young adult,
Yeah,
let's
but-
call it.
And when we talk about different approaches to different collections, we do age things up. And we've done the same thing with some, like I mentioned earlier, with some young adult authors whose series have gotten more mature. We've moved those too.
Let me tell you where I'm heading.
So this is response to what the policy is not.
I want to understand where the bar should be in the graphic novels, where we think they might have trouble compared to what our current policy is, even though it's paused. And those, and the age of other graphic novels that are less. So if you're saying the freshman, sophomore oriented graphic novels aren't a problem because they're not written that way.
So what, I would just like to point out that this OT designation is unique to manga. It
Okay,
doesn't
I'm not
exist with
talking about
graphic
OT, I'm
novels. You
talking-
keep talking about graphic novels.
Yes,
Graphic novels and manga are different.
I understand that.
So they are not.
I understand that
Done
they're
the same
different.
way.
I'm talking about the whole cadre of manga is a graphic novel.
And it is it
Is
is
it-
separately shelved from the graphic novels.
And, okay,
Even in the teen zone, they're in their own shelves.
they're in their own
It's
shit.
its own thing.
So I'm
Yes.
asking, of the other graphic novels.
So the ones
I'm
that are
really-
not manga.
Edra, please.
I'm just trying to clarify because you're confusing the heck out of me, Brett.
Well, you're confusing me.
So you're
All I'm
talking about
trying-
graphic novels.
I'm talking about graphic
Okay.
novels now. I'm just trying to figure out
What's
what
your-
age are they and do they need to be moved into a separate group like the manga or not? And I need to know why.
So the manga is not being moved into a separate group. It is, we have not had a manga collection as part of our general collection in the past. But as I said, prior to the policy changing, we had determined that some of the OT manga had, you know, when we talk about, one of the things about the policy that it listed several different categories of like age appropriate considerations. And if you read the operational response plan, you'll notice that those are the very same categories that publishers use. They're the same categories that librarians use. They're the same categories that are used when we think about how books are aged for different audiences. So when before the policy changed, we already are looking at these considerations when determining where to shelf books in this library. And that is what librarians do everywhere. It's part of the work that we do. So when we talk about graphic novels, they are not rated by the publisher the way that manga is. So when we talk about graphic novels, like books, are purpose written for different audiences. We have a huge graphic novel collection in our juvenile collection that includes many books that are beloved by kids of all ages. Yeah, exactly, you know, what is it? There's like Dog Man, yeah. So, but those are purpose written for that age group, the same way that the graphic novels that are located in our high school collection and the graphic novels that are located in our middle school collection are purpose written for those age groups. So we would not expect to see in those books content that is not intended for a high school audience, even a broader high school audience, because manga is a little different.
That's the question I was asked. Let me ask it from a different way. From the books that you looked at under the current policy before we paused it.
Mhm.
In the you did look at graphic novels.
We had not gotten very far at all in graphic novels. We were focusing on.
So a small sample. How many do you think I'm just curious about the sample size.
Like how many have we reviewed?
Yes. Several hundred? Okay, let's say several hundred. Of that several hundred, how many have failed the collection policy bar?
So the broadly written, poorly written collection development
I wish
policy.
you would not refer to it that way, just the collection policy.
So, what I would say.
Edra,
Okay,
Edra,
so
excuse me, Edra, I'm trying to be very polite in this conversation.
I'm sorry.
That
So,
was
what
a
I'll say-
pretty sarcastic comment.
What I'll say, and I apologize, you're right, that was not helpful with civility.
I'm trying to find out, I'm trying to get information.
So let me start over. So, we've reviewed several hundred, of the graphic novels. And out of that several hundred, we found about a dozen that had content in conflict with the policy as written.
Okay, and that is real content in terms of very descriptive.
it is conflict, or it is content and conflict with the policy, and the policy is very broad. So if it had, we err on the side of the way that the policy is written, which is a zero tolerance for sexual content.
All right, so several hundred books. I'm just trying to see here, several hundred, you said you found about a dozen.
Well, that had content in conflict with the policy as written prior to.
And as for the graphics, which graphic novels, as you said, are written to an age.
Those were the high school ones.
Are you, I'm sure you're familiar, are you familiar with the Library of Congress subclass HQ?
It's been a long time since I've been in library school, so.
Does the books in our catalog have a Library of Congress number associated? I understand that, but there's not a dual system. You don't also retain a number?
We can look that up, but we do not have that.
So it wouldn't be, I wouldn't be able to go through I wouldn't be able to, go ahead, answer her question.
Yeah. But we don't know. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not part of the card catalog. Correct. That you would be able to go and do a screening test on a certain.
HQ.
HQ is family, marriage, women's sexual life, actually.
Okay, gotcha.
And it has a number of subcategories that if we had those numbers on the book, these are pretty clear areas that we would want to have in a even children.
That is mostly, we would have books on women and children and children.
It's okay. Would you like to have a book on sadism, masochism, fetishism?
Do you think that would be found in the high school?
I don't know. Yeah, just saying, let's say,
that would not be a book that was purpose written for children. For adolescents.
That may be true. I'm just saying, I was looking at this as a possible screening method.
Oh, yeah, we don't have that.
Okay,
available.
so that's not possible.
Well, and I think that there seems to be this misunderstanding that we haven't already, that these books have had no screening at all before they're placed there. Of the dozen that have been relocated, I think that they're gonna be more like The Fault in Our Stars than they are like Let's Talk About It. So I think that, and again, when we talk about a percentage, when we talk about that, I think we're talking about a very small group of books. And we're talking about, there seems to be this idea that we're not making decisions, that we don't have the best interests of our readers and our users in mind. We talk with the hundreds of people that come through our doors every single day. They have deep and satisfying relationships with our staff. These are children that come in and hug, Miss Donna every day, that missed her when she was out for a few weeks for a medical issue. These are kids and families that come every week. They're kids and families that we help navigate our collection. They're kids and families that have every approach and every interest in different kinds of books. And this idea that we are not mindful of making sure that our collections are relevant to people that live in our community it makes me sad. And I feel like so many times that, Ray, when you're talking about this, you're acting as if our intent is to hurt. And that is hurtful to us. And it's also just not.
I don't think that's the case.
That's what we feel.
And I think we would say we feel that there are people who've come that have expressed concern that there are books that are falling into the teen section that just shouldn't be there. They're not being heard when that happens.
Well, I think there's a difference between being heard and getting your way.
Well, and
I think people can say that they don't agree with
which is fine.
And that's fine,
So
but
we just need to have a standard. We
do have a standard.
When it comes to being mean and hurtful, I've sat through many a meeting.
Yeah, it's true.
Where people come and been mean and hurtful, rude, nasty and mean. So it's on both sides. It goes around. But that doesn't make it okay. And it does not make it okay. In fact, when those conversations get mean and nasty and hateful, everybody tunes out and no one is heard. No one is heard when it gets mean and nasty and hateful. on an email, in a conversation, and in public comments. And that is why we have to be able to have these conversations so that we can get someplace. And, you know, this is much like the conversation. We were on the phone for 2 hours on Thursday.
Maybe we shouldn't recreate that.
I know, but this is a lot of what we talked about. And, you know, somebody said something about my comments. It's like, we talked about the trends. We talked about older teen. We talked about emerging adult. We talked about keeping the manga where the manga is. And, you know, these are the things that we're learning through this process. And it's a good thing that we're learning. And we are the first library that's doing this.
Doing
And
what? That's
that-
doing what?
That's created a policy to review books that was in accordance with, constitutionally sound. I'm not saying that it was perfect. I'm saying that we were among the first to do it. And now we are understanding the.
And that's a source of pride for you,
And
Tiffany. That's a source of pride.
Michelle, it's not a source of pride. It is simply history. I'm trying to illuminate the terrain upon which we are currently deployed. It is where we are. We decide what happens as we move forward. I cannot change that where we've been. We created a policy.
Us being the first in the nation to do this.
No,
I totally do. To keep, we've been listening for 2 years about this. We've been listening for 2 years. We don't need to spend a whole lot of more time figuring this out.
Michelle, you know, it is very interesting that a lot of this started before 5 of us were on the board. So evidently it was not.
I would say that we resolved it, but.
So that's not what.
We had fewer requests for reconsideration.
Appointments.
That.
I'll tell you right now, our appointment from the council came as a direct result of people going to the council
Right.
from the community saying, have you seen what's going in?
Let's talk,
Many books.
which was
No.
moved prior to.
There was a book, I'll give you an example, there was a book, it was a Latino book that was going after the Catholic Church. And it was on full display, and there was a Catholic person from the community. I've got it on my phone, I'll pull it up, I'll send it
You
to
need
you.
to send it, because if they are concerned about it, they need to.
And so they went to the council members. And that was one. Then you had books like Flamer, you had books like other, there's a lot of books that have been coming to the council members. And that's why Tiffany and I were asked to sit on this board so that we can fix the problem.
Other
We can
than
give you,
Flamer, let's talk.
give you a bunch of books. I will email.
I apologize.
Oh,
My God, apologize.
It's fine. We're sorry. We just hit the 2 hours mark. And while I appreciate healthy debate conversation, which deteriorated just a bit, I think that,
Go ahead.
we definitely have a lot of opinions on this. And someplace in the middle, we will get it figured out. Like I said, you know, this is the intersection of library science and community standards. Yes, a lot of people have said things, but I've always said that there are exactly 2 sides to this. When people email me, I tell them, hey, that's great, but just know that there's somebody out there who's diametrically opposed to what you were saying. So there are definitely 2 sides.
There's multiple sides. Can we not focus on 2 sides?
Well, there's
2 sides, because it's not Democrats versus Republicans.
It doesn't.
Michelle, there are 2 sides.
People who don't sexually exploit the content, why do they get to? Why do you want that? Why do you want that?
Parties. When people come in here,
I agree.
when people come in here, there are people who are in favor of the policy and people who are not. Those are the 2 sides that I am talking about. I'm talking about the people who are diametrically opposed on this position. There are 2 sides to this. And one of the things we hear about parents, we hear about people who are fine with it. And then we also hear from taxpayers. Taxpayers are in the background of a lot of this conversation. So I think as we move forward, we will find a path. And I don't know what that looks like. Certainly, civil conversation is the way for us to go. So
Agreed.
if there's
I'm hearing a lot of divisive rhetoric from this side of my table.
Divisive rhetoric on this side of my table, right here.
Board retreat. And, you know.
I think we've hit a lot of things that have appeared already. Let's maybe table this. Let's come to next meeting and talk about, let's bring some ideas to the table forward.
That's a great idea.
Read what's happening.
Thank you. And I love that, Craig, because I think we've all sat through a lot of meetings. We all have emails. Everybody here knows the history. Bill, hopefully you're up to speed now. Fantastic.
Here.
You're no longer the new guy, so baptized with fire. So, but I think that we all understand the history and the path ahead is where we need to be focused on. So,
Tiffany,
yes.
before we move off that, in light of, in trying to find out what went wrong and what's the, I would really like to have I think there are 11 reviewers that you have, they're reading 11 temporaries.
Those are all paused.
Excuse me?
They're on hiatus. They don't currently work for us. They were temporary employees. So we
Okay.
paused their employment when we used the policy.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
They don't have anything to do.
She confirmed that last meeting.
Okay, I just that. So, okay, what I really would like to get from them though is a post-action report, however you want to refer to it as. I'd like to have them independently sit down and write a page, 2 pages, or half a page, whatever they thought was good, bad, and wrong about what they were doing. That's data that's very important to figure out if there is a chance to resurrect the policy, or do we need to make changes to it that would improve the ability to understand it? We can't do that without, in a vacuum, without hearing from those people.
So to Ray's point, some of the reviewers were already on staff, correct?
Yes.
Are there any of them who are still working at the library? Would it be possible to get some comments from them, just like written words? Like a paragraph.
I guess I'm confused as to what the purpose of this would be, Ray. Are you wanting them to tell you why the policy told them to move along?
I'm confused. I think it's looking for a data point, just some feedback if they can provide it. If they're here doing their other job, if just any feedback from reviewers, it's just a data point, just.
So they're reading the book and they're looking at the standard and they're saying, gee, is it this way? Is it that way? Is it above, below? You know, what questions did she add? What she or he have as they were doing this that were voided and weren't well enough explained to them so that they could make a decision cleanly?
So this policy was binary. It's
Okay,
either there or it isn't.
Edra,
Sure.
And that's the extent of our part-time reviewers.
So 1 second, is it possible for us to get any feedback from any of the reviewers? Any of their independent ideas?
I think that they might feel targeted, or
That's
they
fine.
might feel
Anonymous.
worried
Anonymous. I mean,
that they were being targeted. And
Anonymous,
we
we
don't have it's
No,
not.
Edra, the comments would come into you, you would put a number on the comment and turn it over to the board. We don't need to know who they are.
What is it you're wanting to know?
Oh my God.
I would suggest some questions, Ray. If you're wanting feedback from reviewers, what if you drafted some questions? So
What if
that
you could ask
What
them?
the questions are, because I didn't read.
Could you work with that, Edra?
I have the training materials to you that we
Fair
gave
enough,
the
fair
reviewers,
enough.
if you could use that as a start, to see what, if that you felt.
so you would tell them on.
Yeah, I will write some.
Fantastic. So I think we've agreed to table the rest of this conversation. Fantastic.
until the next meeting, right? Are we gonna address this at the?
Absolutely.
Say the next meeting,
Agenda.
the agenda.
Yeah, let's put it on the agenda and
Yes.
actually ideas moving forward. What can we do here?
Yes, thank you.
And what, we're all gonna bring ideas?
I think we should.
Yes.
I would welcome.
Yes,
I think yes for.
So let me be clear, if I write these questions, then they'll be passed on to whatever readers you can contact.
So, I will take the questions and then I will ask you questions about what your questions are. And then, yeah, I think we can get them to the readers and see if they have any feedback related to those specific questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Just data is always good. Okay.
Fantastic. So at our next meeting, we're gonna have another, are we done with the conversation? Are we just gonna talk about ideas and solutions? Cause I feel like
I
the
think,
dead horse is beaten.
yes, I think we should go to the next meeting.
Can we please not talk about, let's talk about it.
I just want us to have ideas and solutions. I think
How to make sure that people can have input into the collection or the.
ideas and solutions as to how we move forward.
The policy.
Okay,
That's how we move forward.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So I'll just read through my comments that were posted. Director Waterman and I work closely to best manage the intersection of both library science and our community needs. I've learned about difficulties, best practices, and new trends in public libraries. It is my hope and goal to restore peace and civility within our community and remove any tarnish associated with our library. This will take some time, and we will need our patron staff and parents to be patient. As we set the course ahead, I see three top priorities for the board: securing legal counsel, allowing council to review policies, and upskilling our board members. Over the last 2 weeks, Director Waterman and I have discussed how to best ensure community members are being both heard on crucial issues associated with our public library and are receiving the best information possible. We cannot ensure everyone will be happy, but we will gather as much input as possible. Staff has been very accommodating as we've been working. We brainstormed to work and schedule on community listening sessions with an emphasis on capturing ideas and solutions, identifying professional facilitators who can oversee these sessions to ensure that they are productive and well documented. We've identified public relations firms to fully communicate policy changes and protect the library's staff, the library and the staff's reputation. We've compiled a list of frequently asked questions so media, patrons, and tax holders can fully understand more about their community library. We can definitely put that up for review. We've identified professionals to conduct board of trustee training and relationship development exercises. As I said earlier, we have not committed any financial resources to contracts or professional services. We are doing legwork to expedite execution. I've always recognized that the Hamilton East Public Library is navigating uncharted waters, and we have the opportunity to set the stage for the state and nation to follow suit. This will occur when the best of us work together for the greater and combined good. I do not know what the outcomes will be, yet I firmly believe patience, honesty, humility, empathy, and civility will guide us. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Some guidance on the listening sessions. I don't feel like we've, what are we doing with that? What's the consensus of the board?
If we're going to make a decision at the next meeting, I don't know if we're going to have time. I am interested in hosting listening sessions. I would see if the board is also interested in allowing our community members to bring us ideas and solutions. As I envision it, it is not a rehash of any public comments or shoulda, coulda, woulda, you did it, but really the best of us coming together to give ideas and solutions, not writing policy, but an opportunity for the community to really have input on the path ahead.
I support that if we can organize those and have those before the next meeting.
We talked to facilitators who recommend a much longer timeline. We're making sure that they understand what the board's goal is and get those scheduled in ways that we can get people at them. So I just don't know what, from a timing standpoint, we're talking about 2 weeks. So if we want something more formal, I don't think it's possible, but if we're just wanting, I don't even know what questions we're gonna be asking, right? That's a discussion for this board, and to your point, we're heading into the third hour here. Yeah, so do you want to take more time, like keep it paused and take more time for this and get these sessions set up in October? Kind of like we're doing the retreat, because I think the board retreat is important too.
Yes.
Before the final decision is made.
I personally, I would love for us to be able to do the listening sessions, the board retreat. I think that by investing in the board and investing in the community, I think that we will definitely set the best path ahead for our community and for this board working together. I think that, strong teams, people who trust and respect each other, I think that there's a lot more grace that we give each other. And we walk away as colleagues and not just that guy who sits next to me at the meeting. Those are my thoughts.
Well, we've got the retreat set up for the
October 16th.
So, but the next meeting's the 27th, right?
Is it the
27th?
28th, isn't it?
28th, yes, 28th.
Okay.
So I don't know if we have time to do those,
So, because we have to contact a facilitator.
Yeah, and the facilitators really need to talk to you guys to know what you're looking for, so that they know what questions to bring, so that they know, do we want to invite people? Do we want to throw it open? Because I can tell you that in the very short time before we figured out a path forward, that we had listening sessions on the calendar, we hadn't done any PR or marketing for them. We had over 24 people sign up immediately. And so my concern is that how do we manage, to your point, and keep it civil and not rehash things? How do we manage that conversation in a way that it's going to be productive?
Yeah.
And making sure everybody's heard.
So, I know the facilitator that I reached out to, and I've worked with before on something at my church.
Yeah,
I know that she's, okay, fantastic. I know she has time in October. But I don't know if anybody else knows any facilitators.
well, the problem would be is getting her up to speed in terms of the interest that all the board members
Yeah,
have.
consensus around what it is we're looking for, so
Sure.
they know what their charge is.
I think that we could. Can we ever Zoom?
It's all public meetings,
It's all
so
public
it has to be a special meeting, it has to be,
Okay.
and we can't have a meeting on a Zoom unless at least 4 people are physically present.
Okay, well, that's not fair.
It's not great.
All right. So, I guess if we can contact a facilitator, then we work to, one, set up when the sessions would be, and then 2, when we could meet with them to give them guidance.
So could that be something that, I don't know, we try to set 10 minutes at the next meeting aside to just make a list of goals for it, that then I can take to the facilitator or something.
That's put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then as long as we're thoughtful going into
And
it.
it would definitely be we're not trying to resolve anything with this 10 minutes, we're just trying to say, here are our questions.
Yeah.
Here's what we want people to respond to.
Yeah. What did you call it? Thoughtful inquiry?
Appreciative inquiry.
Appreciative inquiry. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for making that point. There are people who left and missed us coming together.
So that's gonna happen at our September meeting?
The targeted discussion on what we want to know from listening sessions.
So we will not work for resolution to the policy at the September meeting. That's what we're saying here.
So I guess they're not mutually exclusive. So we can set these up. I know we've made a lot of adjustments to the collection of development policy. And there might be things we want to do at the next meeting. And I think we'll probably even continue working on it after that. So whether we act, don't act, that'll be up to the whole board. And then at that time, maybe we can maybe we have that discussion, you can put the conversation about the facilitators after that, so we can see if it's still worthwhile, but I suspect we'll probably want to take some action, but I know and I think pretty much every member of this board is want to keep working on this to make it the best that it can be, and we can get community feedback for that, but I don't think that prevents us from taking action that majority of the board thinks is appropriate at the next meeting.
Sure. I would like community input and not feedback. I think that the input is very important.
I see.
Yeah.
So do you want to maybe put a time limit on the discussion of the question of policy?
Time limit.
Like maybe move toward a timed agenda to try to.
Yeah, that's great.
That way we just are like, oh, time's up. Okay.
Yeah, I think a timed agenda would be fantastic. I think
we can work on that too.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
I like that idea. Maybe we even start with a subject. We go around, and we just get so much time, so we make sure everyone's getting heard, then we kind of go into a general discussion based on what everyone said.
Okay. Sure, everybody feels heard. You too, Bill.
No, I appreciate being here, so.
Thank you. Glad you're here. Yeah. And so since we paused it, has there been any feedback from like people looking for anything or any patron feedback?
As far as from an access standpoint,
Finding materials?
I don't believe so, since we've paused it. We have been able to shift our focus of our staff to processing new materials, so we've been able to get new materials out a little faster. So that's been something that's positive, because it's the same team that's splitting their time.
And so we've created 11 unemployed people.
Yeah, but they knew it was temporary, so.
Okay.
I think they were, many of them were going back to school anyway. We had a lot of educators.
Okay.
So the people were asking for the feedback, the reviewers, they're not the temporaries that we let go. These are.
We have a few people who were doing some of the temporary work. They were part-time staff who were picking up hours to do that. So we have some people.
No way to email or ask these people if they'd be willing to provide a speech.
The issue with that is that this should probably be compensated, this time spent on these questions. So that would be my concern with calling people that don't work for us.
I mean, it can't be just ask if they want to do it. If they want to do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't.
Again, from a workforce standpoint, that makes me uncomfortable to ask people to work on me.
It's not, they're not, I don't understand it. This one,
Other people, do we have reviewers who are still working?
Yeah.
We'll just ask them that. Right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
so moved.
Second?
Yeah, second.
No.
Second.
So much.